Well, good evening and welcome to Ohio Dominican University. My name is Tom Brockman, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Central Ohio's Catholic University. This is an extremely exciting evening that we've all been looking forward to for quite some time. In fact, ever since we first found out about this, we've just been ecstatic about it and scheduling this. But before we get started, ODU's Vice President for Mission and Identity, Sister Joan Franks, will lead us in prayer.
10 years ago, the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, D.C. included Thurgood Marshall on his calendar of lesser feasts and fasts. His feast day is celebrated on May 17th, since it was on that day that the Supreme Court handed down its ruling in Brown versus Board of Education, a victory Marshall won for the plaintiffs. And so the prayer I have chosen is the one composed for his feast. Eternal and ever-gracious God, you blessed your servant Thurgood with exceptional grace and courage to discern and speak the truth. Grant that, following his example, we may know you and recognize that we are all your children, brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ, who teaches us to love one another, and who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Joan. I'd like to now introduce the president of Ohio Dominican University, Dr. Peter Symbolic.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to everybody, distinguished guests, and Will. It is my distinct honor to welcome you back to Ohio Dominican University. What a privilege it is to host such an important and timely dialogue. On behalf of the entire Ohio Dominican community, I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are visiting our campus this evening, especially those of you who are here for the first time. Each academic year, we institute a theme for the entire campus that the campus community explores. This year's theme is truth. More specifically, what truths have we learned? Our search for the truth always builds on the wisdom of those who have preceded us. That's why this year's theme ties quite nicely with tonight's topic of conversation. The purpose of tonight's conversation is not just to discuss a book that has received accolades from around the world. It's to shed light on the events that are happening in our communities today. Nearly 50 years after President Lyndon Johnson appointed U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court. Now that there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court, it makes the discussion even more timely. Wil Haygood is undoubtedly one of Columbus's bright stars. We are extremely proud that he also happens to be a product of Ohio Dominican University. As a high school student, Wil attended ODU for 3 summers through our Upward Bound program. In fact, he lived right across the street in Fitzpatrick Hall. Wil's success hasn't come easy. It's taken a great deal of determination, perseverance, and hard work. These are the qualities we seek to nurture through meaningful classroom discussion, community service opportunities, and teachable moments like this event for our students and our community. Wil, on behalf of all of us at ODU and everyone sitting in this room, thank you for discussing your book this evening and engaging in this important dialogue, and I thank you for being here. Good evening.
Thank you, President Symbolic. Now for a bit of background on tonight's guest of honor. Wil Haygood's career as a journalist and author has spanned decades. He spent a combined 30 years reporting for the Boston Globe, where he was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and he also reported for the Washington Post. Wil has written many books, and I know you've read many of them. Some of his books include the 2013 New York Times bestseller, The Butler, which has been translated into more than a dozen languages. The Butler also was turned into a major motion picture, as you might know, featuring Academy Award winners Forrest Whitaker, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Oprah Winfrey. Will also happened to serve as an associate producer for that film. Just this past fall, Will's newest book, Showdown, was published, and it immediately received praise from reviews from around the country and around the world. And by the way, Showdown is available for purchase in our bookstore immediately following tonight's event. Will was recently appointed as the Carl and Helen Wiepking Visiting Distinguished Professor at his alma mater, Miami University of Ohio, where he is currently teaching journalism and film. He's received a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship and a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship. He also received the prestigious Ella Baker Award. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Wil Haygood.
Just a few minutes ago, I was recalling my experience here as a student in the summer times, three straight summers. I was an Upward Bound student, and I took my first college courses here. Some of my friends from those days, I don't know, they might have been riding up down Sunbury Road today and wondering, is Will still trying to get his degree? But I left campus with 9 credit hours. I hit Miami University, and I had 9 college credits. From the courses I had taken here, and since I happened to have graduated only with 2 credits more than I needed, those 9 credits here helped me make it through Miami. So I really needed them. I have a couple of friends here from the Upward Bound program. We all love each other, and we were on campus. One of them is right here, Jeffrey Bristol. Stand up. He's a good man, Jeffrey Bristol. I'm spiritually connected to this campus for so many good reasons, and that's why I come back. I'd like to thank the president. I knew he was my kind of president. On our first meeting, he wanted to meet with me, and I thought I'd have to get on a plane and fly back to Columbus, but no, he said, no, I'll come to you, and he flew to Washington. And so that was very lovely of him to do that. And his wife, Christy Symbolic, the first lady of the university, has had me to her home for a lovely dinner, and it's been a joyful pleasure to get to know you as well. This is a very fascinating moment in American history when you talk about the U.S. Supreme Court. I happen to be in Texas on the Saturday that the late Justice Antonin Scalia passed away. And I was signing books. I was in the state of Texas. Of course, he was one of the most conservative Supreme Court justices. We, of course, do not speak ill of those who have passed away, but Thurgood Marshall was one of the most liberal Supreme Court justices, and I happened to be in the very state where Justice Scalia passed. I was surprised that Texas authorities let me get out of the state. But now the nation is at a fork in the road. The GOP-controlled Senate has said that they will not allow a hearing for the president's eventual nominee. That is wrong. It may be deemed unconstitutional. Time will tell, but this is the free world. This is a big country. Other world leaders look at us, and this moment we are in right now is a space that those who care about the institution of the presidency need to speak up. And you need to write letters to your senators because they will vote on this, and you need to explain to them what's going on. Before I take a seat over there, speaking of letters, I was researching this book, and I came across a letter, and I'd like to read it to you. It was written in 1967. This was a citizen, a U.S. citizen, who did not think that the Senate committee would vote favorably on Mr. Marshall in his attempts to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice. It was written on July 19, 1967. It was written to the Arkansas Senator John McClellan, and it goes like this. Dear Sir, I am a resident of Arkansas and a law-abiding citizen who believes strongly in God, democracy, the United States Constitution, and justice for all. Recently, I read an article concerning remarks made by you and another senator about Thurgood Marshall and his efforts to become an associate justice of the Supreme Court. Sir, I am a Negro and an American. I want you to know how I feel about Mr. Marshall's nomination. I'm sure that I can speak for all of the blacks in Arkansas. Mr. Marshall is just as qualified as any likely candidate that you know. It has been made quite clear which side you are on. We all know why you and the other Southern senators don't want him to be on the Supreme Court, and it's not because of the U.S. Constitution. That old song about the Constitution being misinterpreted is just another excuse. The Supreme Court is not too liberal in its interpretations. Chances are that the nomination will be turned down. But we hope and pray that you will open up your heart and let all the hatred out and let Mr. Marshall's record speak for itself. Color doesn't make the person senator. It is character that makes the man. If he doesn't get the nomination, there will be others who will seek after the same opportunity. There will be hundreds, Senator, and you can't fight them all. Somebody will get it. One of these days, the President of the United States will be a Negro. Sincerely yours, Barbara Ross. One letter from one citizen that did not get answered by her senator. It says, no answer. Well, guess what? Barbara Ross is still alive. I tracked her down. I told her, Mrs. Ross, I'm sorry that a senator from my country did not write you back. But the moral arc, as Dr. King said, often swings toward justice. And I let Mrs. Ross know, when I had an opportunity to speak to her, that her letter has been quoted in my book. She couldn't believe it. She was 18 years old when she wrote this letter. She was home from college in the summertime. Students, Write your letters to your senators. You have a chance now to be a part of American history. This is a historic moment in this nation's lifeblood. The last thing Mrs. Ross said to me when I was talking to her, she said, "Now tell me, honey, what it was like working with Miss Oprah Winfrey, because I love her so much." Thank you. I'm going to roll over here now. We're going to have a conversation.
Thank you, Will. That's one of my favorite stories. Just a few notes regarding tonight's format. Don't worry, he's not done speaking tonight. That was just a teaser. Now, to help ensure we cover as much ground as possible, the next 30 or 40 minutes will be a Q&A style format with one of our English faculty members. Now, following their discussion, we'll open the floor and accept a few questions from the audience. Now, to get this discussion underway, please join me in welcoming ODU Professor of English, Dr. Ann Hall.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm honored to be here and honored to be with Will. We've had a long email relationship, going back and forth, talking to one another about various topics and conversations. So I'm honored to be here tonight asking him some questions and basically, you know, giving you a final exam. And I'm going to grade you on these. Why did you write a book about Thurgood Marshall? Why is this so important to you?
I tend to write books about things that frighten me, things that scare me. I knew nothing about boxing, so I spent 5 years working on the book about Sugar Ray Robinson. I knew next to nothing about the law, and I thought it would be very exciting to tell the story of Thurgood Marshall. If I could find a Wil Haygood window, you know, a non-linear, a different way to tell the story, going through a side door, you might say, and the door I went in was the door to his confirmation hearings, 5 days, each day's hearing, and that's how the book is structured. And I think any African American in this country born in the year 1954, as I was, you know, you grow up with that year stamped on your brain when you hear it, because it was the year of freedom. It was a year when a black mother could look in her crib at her children. It was actually me and my sister. I have a twin sister, and so my mother in the year 1954 could look at her kids and say, "Thank the Lord, you've been born in the year of freedom," at least as far as in education, in books. And so that's a powerful thing for somebody who has vested years in their life about telling the story of this country through certain figures.
Thank you. How does his research and book connect with our theme of truth?
It was truly hard to get the book done. But
5 years, was it? You were working on it 5 years.
But what Thurgood Marshall was saying to these state judges or federal judges who he had to face in these southern courtrooms, what he was saying is that the truth needs no defense, because here is the Constitution. And so if you deny blacks their rights, you're breaking your own laws, because the Constitution needs no defense. It is the truth. It is. And I think that was a very important engine of his thinking. From courtroom to courtroom, he was simply telling the truth. It is not right for the black school district to have 3 school buses, in the white school district to have 50. It's not right. It's not right for the black school teachers to be paid 1/3 of the salary that the white school teachers are being paid. He had to stitch the truth for blacks into the Constitution. He had to stitch it in there, and he did that through all of his victories in front of the Supreme Court.
What is it that motivated him to do this, to go out? You say in the beginning of the book, oh my gosh, he's traveling all over the place in the South where people are not welcoming him. You mentioned that even though he wasn't welcomed, he would sometimes leave a bottle for the local sheriff, just maybe, that might help him out later. But what is it that motivated him?
He'd leave a bottle hoping that the local sheriff would get drunk.
Oh, is that what he did?
And wouldn't try to stop him from getting out of town.
From leaving out of town.
Yeah, bourbon.
It wasn't a present.
No,
it was
no.
Self-defense.
No.
It was self-defense.
He was always thinking 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. And what is it that motivated him? You mentioned his ambition coming from something, when he was very young.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It had to scar him. His mother, who's a school teacher, wanted him to go to the University of Maryland School of Law. But in 1926, the University of Maryland School of Law was not accepting blacks. And so he saw the hurt on his mother's face. He saw that. He saw that. Oh, mama is just so crushed. His mother went to college, to a small college, had her degree, and was a school teacher. And I think, that haunted Thurgood Marshall. He was a brilliant student at Lincoln University, and then he went off to Howard University Law School. And he graduated first in his class, #1, the top student. So his mother, still on his mind. The University of Maryland, when Thurgood Marshall graduated from law school, still was not accepting blacks. So Thurgood Marshall went out and found a guy named Donald Murray, who had a college degree. And he said, Donald, I understand you're interested in the law, so apply to the University of Maryland. And he said, Mr. Marshall, there's no way I can do that. They won't accept me. And Thurgood Marshall said, I know they won't. I'll sue them, and I'll win.
Oh, that's great.
And he did. He sued the University of Maryland. Donald Murray became the first black. And on the first day of law school for Donald Murray, there were some threats from some other students. And Thurgood Marshall was a tall guy, big guy with broad shoulders. He escorted Donald Murray to law school on the first day. And then he later that night, he called his mom on the phone and said, Mama, Mr. Murray is now a law student at the University of Maryland. It was those kind of things that drove him.
Yeah.
Those moments.
Yeah.
Those moments.
Oh, that's great. Could you tell us a little bit about the research process, maybe some of the stories you uncovered as you were researching this book?
Yeah, it was 5 years. It was a lot of travel. And it was just so many stories. Thurgood Marshall went to Mims, Florida, and made friends with a voting rights couple for the NAACP, Harry and Harriet Moore. And they were wonderful people, and Marshall had slept in their home, and On Christmas Eve, 1951, the Moores went out to dinner. While they were away, 3 Ku Klux Klansmen slipped under their house and left sticks of explosives. They came back home, and it was about 10 o'clock that night, and they finished wrapping gifts. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the house exploded.
Oh my gosh.
And Mr. Moore, Harriet Moore, died on impact. And Mrs. Moore was rushed to the hospital. I tracked down their daughter, Evangeline Moore, who took me through this whole scene. She was on a train and reached Florida on Christmas afternoon, didn't see her parents at the train station. Relatives said Mom and Dad have been hurt, Dad has died, and Mom is at the hospital. She rushes to the hospital, and she's told, if your mother can survive 7 days, we believe she'll pull through this. Mm-hmm. She'll pull through it. And Harriet Moore died on the 6th day. Oh. She didn't make it. So Marshall was heartbroken too. And these were the first 2 NAACP workers to die in the line of duty in this country, Harry and Harriet Moore. So Thurgood Marshall rushes to Florida, to be with the family. He had slept in this very home. It very well could have been him. Mm-hmm. He always got death threats, a lot of death threats. He was a very brave lawyer. So on the day that he was ready to leave Florida, he didn't call ahead to the airport because a ticket agent might tell some of the local hoodlums who wanted to kill him, they might say, hey, Thurgood Marshall was on that road heading to the airport. And so Marshall's plan was just to go to the airport without any advance phone calls. He was just going to buy his ticket in cash. Marshall had a strange relationship with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover did not have any great love for black people, but even lower on Hoover's food chain was hoodlums and thugs. Marshall would tell J. Edgar Hoover in memos which whites in this southern city are members of the KKK, of the Ku Klux Klan. And Hoover thought Marshall was very brave. So back to Thurgood Marshall trying to get to the airport. He's sitting outside of the segregated motel, and a friend is going to drive him to the airport. And all of a sudden, 2 burly white men appear out of nowhere, and they walk across the street, heading right toward Thurgood Marshall, sitting in the car. And one of them says, roll down the window, roll down the window. And Thurgood Marshall does. And the man leans in and says, Mr. Marshall, J. Edgar Hoover sent us, our boss, and we are here to get you safely to the airport.
Wow, wow.
Hollywood just bought the movie rights to my book. That's going to be a scene in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Roll down the window, all that. Then the next, and then an hour later, they're at the airport, and the ticket agent looks at Thurgood Marshall, black man, and says very rudely, there are no more seats for sale. And the FBI agent looks at her and says, lady, if you do not get this man on that next airplane, we will shut this airport down. Next scene, Thurgood Marshall floating through the clouds and with some swelling, lovely music, knocking back a bourbon. That's the next scene in the movie.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I've been working on it.
I can
you
see
know.
that. Any other ones you want to share? Or?
Scenes?
Yeah. That was good. Wasn't that good? We want more of that. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Well, today one of my students Laura asked you, this is such a great title. How did you come up with that title? And do you want to tell that story? That's a pretty good story.
Yeah, the original title for my book was Confirmation. A justice who's going to be confirmed. And so 4 years, that's what I was mentally.
It's just in your genes,
Yeah.
You're thinking about this title.
Yeah, that's my title for 4 years. And on the 5th year, I get a call from my editor, and he says, hey, I think we can come up with a much better title. That's like saying that you're suddenly married to the wrong woman. That's like a radical thing to put in your ear. We need a new title. What? And so I had to go to bed that night mentally thinking that my book doesn't have a title. It's out there now, it's naked. My book is naked now. It's naked. It doesn't have a title. And so the next morning, I went for a walk, and I'm saying to myself, wow, I have to think of a way to convey this awesome showdown in the U.S. Senate over Thurgood Marshall's battle to get onto the Supreme Court. And in the middle of the night, I popped up sort of like a person who had had some cold water thrown on him. I just popped up and I said, that's it, Showdown, Showdown. That's the title of the book, Showdown. Showdown, yeah, Showdown. And so I called my editor up and I said, hey, Peter, I think I got the title. He said, what is it? I said, Showdown, Showdown. And there was a pause and he said, I like it so much, I need time to think about it. And I said, Showdown, Showdown. The title of this book is going to be Showdown. Like Showdown, title of the book. And so he called me back an hour later and he said, it's wonderful.
Oh,
that's what we're going to go with, Showdown.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's what we did.
Yeah, I love that story. How does the experience from the 60s connect to and relate to today's events? We have a lot of young people here who were not even born then.
Yeah, in the 60s you had, you had a lot of, like unusual people running for higher office. And then like today you have Donald Trump running for higher office. A reality TV star. You open this can of worms, so I'm gonna run.
Go, I want you to go.
I want the Republican Party to be smart, to be insightful. There were Republican senators who helped Thurgood Marshall get to the Supreme Court. And now there is not one Republican senator who has stood up to the Kentucky senator, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, and said, sir, you are wrong. You are embarrassing the leader of the free world. And would this happen to a president who was white?
Right.
Would it happen?
No.
I think we have to look ourselves in the mirror
Right.
and we have to answer that question because it is a serious issue. And now for them, Southerners did not like Thurgood Marshall. but they gave him a hearing. They ruled the committee.
Yeah.
And they gave him a hearing. Thurgood Marshall, #1 law school graduate at Howard University Law School, had argued 32 times before the Supreme Court, winning 29 times. If you deny that person their nomination hearing, you are embarrassing your country. And that is what we saw today. Last night I went to bed and I could not have envisioned that I would wake up this morning and see where the GOP Senate had said, we won't even give your nominee, it can be the most brilliant person in the world, a year without a Supreme Court justice, which means this. There'll be 8 justices, so it could be 4-4, and it would go back down to the lower court. And so what if there's a man or woman on death row who has been cleared by DNA, and that's been appealed, and they appealed again to the Supreme Court? They could be put to death because the Supreme Court knocked it back down to a lower court. And so this is a dangerous moment in this nation's history that they won't even give the nominee a hearing. We've never seen it since George Washington started nominating Supreme Court justices. We have never seen this.
Just so disrespectful. Just
yes,
so disrespectful.
It is. The battle, the battle is explained in my book. Somebody asked me yesterday, he said, goodness, did you plan this timeliness? I mean, like, did you know that this would happen this way? And I said, look, my last name is Haygood, not Haygod. I had no way of knowing this, but goodness, it's there. It's there. The story is there. And here we are at this moment.
Now, can you talk about the film adaptation of the book?
Just sold movie rights to Showdown.
Yay,
Hey.
Yay, 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 yay.
But it's still early,
Right.
It just happened, and so we'll see. But I do know I'd like my man Forrest Whitaker to play
Oh yeah.
Thurgood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like my man Forrest.
Yeah. Now, how much input do you have in those kinds of decisions with the filmmaking? How does that work?
Yeah, some. I've been named one of the producers, so that's nice. It takes so long to make a movie, though.
Right.
With The Butler, the story was written in 2008, and the movie came out in 2013. So that's 5 years. But I think these movie producers are leaning toward, a 5-day miniseries. Maybe. So I think that'd be interesting.
Do you have any control over the script? So what you wrote in your book, I mean, if they take it in a different direction and they don't give you that airline scene with the bourbon, can you just say, no, we have to have that airline scene with the bourbon, or I'm leaving,
Yeah.
I mean.
Fortunately, both of these movie producers who bought the rights to the book, I think of them as dear friends.
Oh, good.
And so, I think I'll have some input.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And another question that came up with the students was, what effect does a film have on society? We have The Butler. Now we're going to have Showdown. And what kind of effect is this going to have on our culture?
Films are big. I mean, The Butler just opened in Poland. In Poland, somebody just sent me the movie poster. In Poland, it just opened.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
I missed the premiere. You know, but it just opened there, you know, which is just wonderful. And so the Butler has now opened in 72 foreign countries. That is astonishing.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
Yeah.
72, you know, and so I think that, but it's interesting, and I think society moves faster than movies. I think this nation knows that we should not have gone through 2 straight years without a single black acting Oscar nominee. We know that.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah.
We know that there's too much talent on the screen
Right.
that's not being recognized. We know that, and so the world, people are much faster than Hollywood.
Right.
Or else Hollywood wouldn't be stuck in this framework. I remember a Vanity Fair article when The Butler came out in 2013, and the article said, Hollywood finally gets emancipated. In 2013.
Yeah.
Now that said, though, if there are students out there or writers out there, it is a fascinating time to be of this moment, of this country, writing movies, because there are a lot of great people who are white in Hollywood who do want to help these stories be told. Mm-hmm. There is no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, society, I mean, it's still considered on screen sort of taboo for a black to kiss a white. And yet we see it every day.
Right.
On this campus, at Ohio State, downtown, in the park, walking around my apartment building.
Right.
Every day we see,
Right.
you know what I mean, mixed couples.
Yeah.
They love each other and
Right.
they've fallen in love.
And they have children.
Yeah, but in the movies, you know, it's like radical to see
Right.
an interracial couple. And so Hollywood's mindset is slow. It's just slow.
Right.
It's just slow.
Right. Well, Thurgood Marshall and his second wife. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I mean, he married a Filipino woman.
Yes.
And there was some, you know, a little anxiety about that when he announced that, but they seem to remain together for many, many years.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting. During the year of Thurgood Marshall's hearing in 1967, just before that, there was the great case, the Loving case, Loving v. Virginia, which many of you know about. I mean, and that happened right as Thurgood Marshall is sitting there being grilled, and one of the senators, Strom Thurmond from South Carolina, who we later found out had a black mistress, Strom Thurmond, I mean, asked him, he said, well, Senator, Mr. Marshall, what do you think about interracial relationships? Now, if one of his staff members had been heady, he might have leaned over and said, Senator, I don't think you want to go there.
Right.
You know, so it's very interesting.
Hate to interrupt the discussion.
All right.
This is
Well,
absolutely
thank you.
fascinating.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to you both for discussing all this. This is great. Now, we certainly want to make sure we leave time for any of you to ask questions here. If you have a question that you'd like to ask Will, please feel free to use either of the mics in the aisles here. If you are able, we'd like you to get up and walk to a mic. If we are able, we won't have people bring these around. But we do ask that you, one last note, try to keep your questions fairly short so we can make sure we get to as many of these questions as possible.
Real quick.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Will, for coming. Minister Kujenga Elia Shea, the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. I have a question. You know, recently Donald Trump took issue with the Pope. We're in a Catholic university. Can you give me just a little take on that whole piece? How do you criticize the leader of the Christian faith since we're in a Catholic university? What is your take on Trump and versus the Pope?
Yeah. Look.
That's a good question. Everybody likes that
Yeah,
question.
look, I'm still very baffled that, speaking of a church, that Donald Trump has been married 3 times.
Yeah.
And is seemingly has a lot of the evangelicals in his back pocket. So, you know, he's a player and getting away with it. I mean, how else can you and describe it? I mean, and his vulgar comment about the Pope's intellect was just awful. I think that the Republican Party, allowed him to get out in front. And, it looks like he's going to be the nominee, and he's going to take him over the cliff. He is. Donald Trump has already said that he's made a lot of money off the campaign from selling T-shirts and hats. So he is hustling. He's treating it like a TV show. This is serious business. This is the free world. This is, our leader is the leader of the free world. It's not Saturday Night Live. It's not some TV show. But I think that some of the blame goes with the dumbing down of politics. And, is there anybody in here who thinks Sarah Palin really needed her hand a minute away from the nuclear weapon? I mean, please, come on now. I mean, I'm not hating on Sarah Palin. She was chosen to be the vice presidential nominee, but Tina Fey had her number. This is serious business, and you got Donald Trump at the head of your ticket, then your party is in trouble. It really is. There's just no doubt about it. The Republican Party is in trouble, and there's going to be a price to pay for this type of lunacy and this nuttiness. There will be a price to pay for it. I mean, the moderates have been wiped off the map. There were, like I said, Republicans who helped Thurgood Marshall. Next question. Hey,
Hi.
Dr. Shorter.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Wil, because we grew up together, went to school together. He's famous and wonderful, and we're from the Shepherd community, and so I have a proclamation here that I'd like to read. It's just short. But it says, whereas America has been blessed with an abundance of men and women who proudly and bravely serve their country through their talent and commitment, whereas Wil Haygood initially wanted to serve his country as a basketball player, but wisely chose instead to become an award-winning writer. Whereas as a journalist and novelist, Mr. Haygood has enlightened the world about heroes both well-known and unknown from the Black community. Whereas his talent and insight have shed light on complex issues and events in our modern history. Whereas we in the Shepherd community believe his work highlights the values and perspective of our community. And whereas we proudly recognize and honor our great artists such as Elijah Pierce, Roman Johnson, and Amina Robinson, who through their lives and livelihood have close association with the Shepherd community. Now therefore we, the Shepherd community, do hereby recognize and honor and claim Wil Haygood as a native son of Shepherd through his association with members of our community, and place him in the pantheon of great artists affiliated with our community. May he continue to write his way into the hearts and history of this great country, expressing the best of his talent and unselfishly sharing his gifts throughout the world. Be it resolved this 24th day of February in the year 2016.
Aw, that was beautiful.
Oh, that was so, wow. Thank you, Dr. Shorter. That was
beautiful.
That was so lovely. That goes a long way toward erasing some of the memories I have of playing basketball out in Shepherd and always getting beat. Thank you very much. I'd like a copy of that.
Thank you for being here. My name's Mike Hubert. I apologize, I have not read your book yet. Did you ever meet Thurgood Marshall? And if you haven't, what question would you want to ask him?
Mm-hmm. He asked me if I ever met Thurgood Marshall. So this is, I left here and moved to New York City and got a job at Macy's department store. And one weekend, I was at Penn Station, at the train station, trying to get to New Jersey to see a friend of mine. And 3 state troopers cut right down the middle of Penn Station. And they said, "Move out the way," real loud voice, and nobody knew why. And they got ready to go down the steps, and then they parted. And right in the middle of them was Thurgood Marshall. And it was like in 1988, maybe, 1987. He was in his robe. So he had obviously probably come up, he had obviously come up on the train to swear somebody in, and he was in his robe, and it was about 8 seconds, and I saw him, and I just stood there and said, "Oh my God, this Thurgood Marshall." And then one time I wrote a letter to him. I was working on a book about the New York Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, and he wrote me back. It was a beautiful letter, and I still have it. He said, "Dear Will, thank you for your letter. I'm sorry my memory is just not what it used to be, but I'm happy that you are writing this book." He was a very important figure in Harlem history. Sincerely yours, Thurgood. And it was on like real Supreme Court beige.
The paper, the
embossed paper. It was beautiful. And, at that time, I, of course, didn't know that I would someday write a book about Thurgood Marshall. But if I ever saw him, I would just like to say, I don't know if I would have anything to ask him, but I would have something to tell him. I would say, "Mr. Marshall, Barbara Ross, who wrote a letter on your behalf, has a copy of a book written by a child born in 1954.
Oh.
I know I asked this question a little earlier, but I wanted to it was brief, and I want to get some more of your thoughts. Could you expound really if you feel that literature influences social change, or if social change reflects in literature?
Yes, Luke, great question. I think that that our writers push society forward. I really do. I mean, where would we be without Dorothy West, without James Baldwin, without Langston Hughes, without Toni Morrison, without Zora Neale Hurston, F. Scott Fitzgerald? Where would we be? You know, Hemingway writes a lot about war and the awfulness that war caused. I have covered 3 wars, and it's awful. You know, nothing ever happens, it seems, at the end of the wars. You know, a lot of people are maimed and hurt, arms slashed off. You know, we are still in countries that we went to 7 years ago, 12 years ago, you know, and so, but then books get written, you know, and people find a new way to look at a serious problem. I hope tonight every senator, somebody throws a copy of Showdown up on their porch. You know, that's what I'm hoping, like just throw it through the window. It's like, read that.
Yeah.
With your morning newspaper.
Let's take this last two questions here, just because we're running short on time. But don't worry, you'll have an opportunity to say a few words to Wil during his book signing, which I'll talk more about here in a minute.
Hi. I was wondering, on social media and everything, you're seeing a lot of, instead of truth, you're just sort of seeing really opinionated people. And I'm wondering if you know where is a good place to begin if you're really trying to get to the truth of law and the truth of this country and all those sorts of things. Where would you begin? There's a lot of information there. And if you want to come to someone with a good, unbiased, just truth, hard-hitting truth, where would you start with that?
Mm-hmm. A whole lot of truth comes from inside who we are. Simply common sense. It's wrong to do that. It's wrong to build a wall to keep Muslims out of this country. It's wrong. That's common sense. It's wrong. It is wrong to try to take rights away from women. It's wrong. It's just wrong. You know, from within, so much of it really comes from within, especially when we have, I mean, goodness, we just saw where Ted Cruz had one of his campaign people fired for telling a lie, you know, and so that stuff tends to sort of shake itself out. I mean, Ted Cruz, he's another, like, you know, like Star Trek, way out there nutcase. I mean, like, where did these people come from? I mean, the Republican Party, you can do better. There must be Republicans in this room, and bless your hearts, because we need both parties. I mean, we do, but we do not need jackleg politicians, you know, people who are in it for the wrong reasons, you know, and who, who have shown great disrespect toward the leader of the free world, who happens to be African American. And but it's still the same country that elected an African American twice. And so there are still a lot of great people, righteous people, who know right from wrong in this country. I mean, and so I think it's all going to shake out in this next election, and I think the right person will win. I'm not going to, you know, I mean, she will win.
All right.
Thank you.
First of all, Wil, thanks for stopping by the class and sharing a word with the students right next door.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you for having me.
When you left, one of the things that I shared with them was it's hard to be a leader if you're not fully transparent. And I pulled out the book for them, the Haygoods of Columbus.
Wow.
And this is another outstanding book that Wil has written. And you're totally transparent in this book. You were not a great student in college.
Right.
And yet you're one of the greatest authors, I believe, in the history of the country, and certainly an outstanding journalist. What would you say? What would you say to young people about finding their passion, the thing that they're really intended to do?
Thank you. That for you all who, I'm sure many of you know who that is, but that is the Honorable Ray Miller. You know, I walked into newsrooms and didn't have a degree in journalism. I didn't. And newsrooms are very, you know, they can be snobbish and arrogant places, you know. There was a lot of people around me who went to Yale and Harvard and Duke, but, you know, I had a passion to write stories, to write books. And it's, you know, my quest has been, you know, very, you know, simple in my own mind. I saw a road and wanted to take it. You know, I knew what was right and wrong. I came up with this story to tell this story about this White House butler who had been out there, who had worked at the White House for 35 years, and nobody else came up with the idea to find him and do the story, you know, and nowhere where I've gone have I gotten the simple benefit of the doubt. I would have loved to have gotten that sometimes, but I think when I started making a name for myself, and then it happened, but even when you don't get the benefit of the doubt, you have to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. And I kept giving myself the benefit of the doubt. I kept saying, you'll be okay being a foreign correspondent. You'll be okay being a national writer. You'll be okay, Will. Fear none of it. You know, don't fear rooms that are dark or murky. Light them up.
Oh, that's great.
Light the room up. Light the room up. And that's what I've tried to do. And I thought about that White House butler whose house, by the way, has recently been designated a historic landmark. His home becomes the first house of a butler in the United States of America that has been designated a historic landmark. And so, thank you. And so it, you know, I certainly don't look at myself as first anywhere, but I think of the butler when I say this. It says in the Bible, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first.
Thanks so much, Will. Thank you, Ann. Unfortunately, we've just about run out of time, but I certainly want to thank you for all your great questions. That last question was certainly terrific. As I mentioned earlier, copies of Will's book, Showdown, are available in the bookstore. They're located right outside the main doors in the Griffin Student Center. And Will has graciously agreed to stick around and sign copies of the book. And that will take place in the Fireplace Lounge in our Student Center, which is just outside the bookstore. Now, if you're interested in buying a book and having it signed, we ask that you please enter through the doors of the Griffin Student Center that are located nearest to the parking lot. So you'll head out these doors, hang a right, then go through the doors close to the parking lot. Don't worry, there'll be some students there to help direct you there. And we'll have, as I said, we'll have members of the President's Society there to help direct you. But again, I want to thank Will for visiting us tonight, telling us more about this outstanding book and this profoundly influential figure. I also want to thank each of you for visiting us and visiting our campus. We certainly hope you'll be back again soon. And please drive safe going home.